Recent ructions in Canberra have focused political attention on the disunity in the Labor Party, but Tony Abbott is facing dissent in his ranks as well. Today, the opposition leader reaffirmed his commitment to a parental leave scheme, which would give new mothers 6 months fully paid leave with business made to pay for it. He's called it a signature policy, the defining mark of his leadership. But some in his party are alarmed that too many spending promises are risking the opposition's economic credibility. Political editor Heather Hewitt reports.
Stephen Smith and Bill Shorten and now Bob Carr might think that they're the next Prime Minister of Australia, but I think I'll be the next elected Prime Minister of Australia.
Tony Abbott clearly thinks government is his for the taking whenever the election is called, and said so last weekend at the Liberal National Party's state campaign launch in Queensland. But is his team united about the best way to win?
There is a concern that the coalition is sending out mixed messages, that some taxes are going to be cut, but other taxes are going to be raised.
As a former long-serving finance minister, I have reservations about all big spending policies.
It's very clear that there is a whole lot of disagreement behind closed doors just about where cuts are going to be made and where spending priorities should be.
There has been an internal struggle in opposition ranks for months now over populism versus sound economic management, and somehow trying to find a balance in policy formation. It's just that no one is prepared to say so publicly. There's no greater example than Tony Abbott's paid parental leave scheme. He's sticking with it despite the reservations of many of his colleagues, and he left no room for doubt about that today.
This is an absolute signature policy. It is an absolute signature policy. It is going to be one of the defining marks of my leadership of the coalition.
You can't be saying we'll cut some things, but then promise to spend more money on a scheme that doesn't have that much support anyway and is going to hit business with higher taxes.
The paid parental leave scheme that's proposed does seem to be very much on the excessive side.
And therein lies the dilemma. This is just one area where the coalition is sending a conflicting message, announcing a new form of tax on business, plus other big spending items, but at the same time, it's pledged to slash the public service and dump the carbon and mining taxes. This leads some, both inside and outside the party, to raise questions of economic credibility.
Probably for too long, the coalition's economic team has rested on the laurels of Howard and Costello. Now, both of them are gone, and new credentials have to be established, and they can only be established by deed. And at the moment, it doesn't look like there's a clear message coming through.
Is he, for instance, an economic rationalist, believing in low taxes and low government? Yes, in some instances. Or is he a big spending Prime Minister who is going to levy at least one tax on business to pay for a social scheme?
Little wonder that at times we've seen confusing and conflicting signals coming from Tony Abbott and his economic team on areas like delivering a budget surplus.
We will do it as soon as possible. I mean, look, you've got to be measured in this.
Well, it just depends. As I say, there's so much uncertainty around the numbers.
What we're seeing is basically differing tactics being played out sometimes through the front pages of the newspapers, and that's difficult because for a successful government that Tony Abbott wants to lead if he becomes Prime Minister, he needs people on the same page.
They've got to minimise any sort of disagreements or stumbles when it comes to the economy and economic policy, and economic policy is one of the Liberal Party's great strengths. So to the extent there have been any differences, they're unfortunate and they need to be eliminated.
It's no secret that the finance spokesman, Andrew Robb, would have liked Joe Hockey's Treasury portfolio after the last election. They've had their tensions, though insist they work well as a team.
I don't think they're bosom buddies, but in politics on both sides, Labor and Liberal, you get a disparate group of men and women who come together and have to work together, whatever their personal differences might be.
The opposition claims to have 40 of its 49 policy areas completed and costed. And the business community, for one, is keen to start seeing some detail.
We would like more policy information, and we would also like more information about some of the aims and ambitions for economic management if they were in government.
I think the opposition has to be careful not to be rushed into bringing out policies that could prove to be superseded by whatever the government then does or what happens in the rest of the world.
The coalition is ever mindful of the destruction of its then leader, John Hewson, when policies were released way in advance of the 1993 election that Paul Keating won. Through all of this internal debate, former leader Malcolm Turnbull hovers in the wings, though there's no appetite in the party to restore him to the leadership. And that's one theme that is consistent. But given Labor's strife of late, there are some raised eyebrows as to why Tony Abbott hasn't surged in opinion polls.
The informed part of the electorate has no idea what he really stands for. The uninformed part of the electorate just doesn't trust him. And he does have a problem with women. Many women find him creepy. They find him full of passive aggressiveness. They can't quite work the guy out. And they're still struggling after all this time.
The picture is much more mixed than the claim that simply women don't like Tony Abbott. I think Australian politics at the moment, such as it is one that is not attractive to men or women, and especially women, because they're usually better judges of political character.
And it's not just the Labor Party with their extraordinary antics of late. The Liberal Party seems to be in a great mess at the moment too. They cannot get their act together, and is it any wonder that ordinary voters just shrug their shoulders and say, "Oh, please, can we move on?"
So they don't like their choices?
It seems they don't.
But they will have to decide sometime in the next 18 months when the nation goes to the polls.